Greetings from my tub. I'm in here getting 5% cash back when I pay in full with PayPal. No fees, no interest. Make the most of your money this holiday with PayPal. Save the offer in the app.
Ends 12/31. See paypal.com/promo terms. Points can be redeemed for cash and more. Pay in for subject to terms and approval. PayPal link at MLS 910457.
Hold on. We've got some guys. Hold on.
Breaking news, by the look of it.
Yeah.
What was that?
We didn't say. This is the news that Andrew is no longer a prince.
What's happened? The bad news is he's become king.
Yeah. What else is he losing?
Is it the house?
Yeah. There he is. I've heard Rachel Reeves has got a place to rent, though. Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the Perry to our midweek Trudeau. I'm Alex.
And I'm Kenny, who was thinking it was going to be the Perry to our midweek Kevin, which means that our reference points are somewhat different, Alex. Not that you're going to
Yes, mine are from this decade. How are you? Did you have many trick-or-treaters?
We sneaked out last night. I was at the Barber's yesterday afternoon, and she loves Halloween. She was off to buy lots of Haribo from the co-op to keep kids happy with. And I said, they can bloody buy their own sweets at this day and age. I'm going to the co-op and I'm buying chocolate. And I'm eating the chocolate as well. That's how my trick-or-treat goes, because I'm a miserable Grinch. Exactly.
Are there a lot of kids around that dress up and go trick-or-treating?
Do you know, there were tons last night when we came out. Do you know, I lost count of how many groups I saw in Topsham and in Exeter. But they were swarming. It all looked a bit Hitchcockian because, you know, in this day and age, they don't wander around in pairs, knocking in doors. There's a responsible adult and 15 mad kids sort of hyped up on sugar, all dressed in stuff from Aldi's middle aisle.
Brilliant.
Did you go trick-or-treating? You're the sort of man who I think might do.
I am not, I assure you. And I didn't see any, to be honest. Mind you, it was lashing it around the appropriate time of the early evening. It was raining in sheets.
When I was a kid, and we didn't call it trick-or-treating, that's an Americanism. We called it guising. We went guising. You'd dress up in a homemade rubbishy outfit. And it being Fort William, you would get traditionally rained on. And so by the time you got to your second door, it wasn't clear whether you dressed up or just been dragged out of the local canal.
Are you sure that's not just something your parents said to you because you were poor?
They sent me out every night. Every night.
Guising. Let's do some more guising, little Kenny. A very good friend of mine from my former work, her parents used to tell her that when the ice cream van plays the music, it means it's out of ice cream. She believed it for years. So anyway, the cruel things our parents tell us. I guess it's a good segue to me putting out our little plastic pumpkin to ask for a bit of a treat from listeners, because as listeners know, we make every little bit of content available to absolutely everyone for free at the same time. Nothing is behind the paywall. Nothing is privileged. The only thing that we do offer to the faithful listeners that can afford to support us on ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod is occasional editorial meetings and regular Ask Us Anything sessions online. And there is one of those coming up very, very soon, isn't there, Kenny?
It's a late night one as well, isn't it? It's an 8:30 start on the 13th of this month, unlucky for some. And at that time of the night, I'll be able to record from the comfort of my local pub, actually. I'm going to get a seat next to the fire in the globe. So do join us on ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod, and you'll get an invite to that particular meeting on the 13th.
Yeah, a week on Thursday. And the reason we're doing it a little bit later in the evening is because, as you know, we mix the times up so that people are not excluded by virtue of their regular shifts. So we've had them early evening, we've had them at the weekend, lunch times, we had them in the morning. And we're doing one late in the evening after a few requests from supporters in Australia and New Zealand on one side and America and Canada on the other, for whom that sort of time is slightly more convenient. So we hope to see loads of you at the session, and anyone who wants an invite can join us now.
Apart from Halloween, then, what's got everyone talking this week, Alex, as if I don't know already?
Well, we have swerved the story for about a month now, but there is no more avoiding the tale of the prince who turned back into a frog, now that his brother has basically cancelled him. So we'll talk about that, but we'll try and keep it political.
Yeah, and I suppose whatever we think about the Rachel Reeves housing episode, it's definitely grabbed the attention of the chatterati. So we should take a quick look at where it leaves Reeves ahead of the budget.
Plus, as an extra treat, we have a little report on some very, very good news for once from the Dutch election result, featuring a voice you might recognize.
And finally, well, it is the season to be scary, isn't it? All the distribution companies and streaming services release their most frightful offerings around Halloween, don't they? But what are our favourite morsels of horror?
Excellent. Onwards and upwards.
Quiet, riot. Once upon a time, in a damp little kingdom that loved its tabloids even more than its traditions, there lived a prince called Andrew. He was the Queen's favourite son, brave in the Falklands, fond of uniforms, less fond of humility. For decades, this petulant prince roamed the glittering courts of the rich and powerful, disguising his character with charm, mistaking connections for friendship, and generally being a bit of an arse. An exceptionally privileged arse, but an arse all the same. As the years passed, the whispers about Andrew grew ever more persistent. A sense of entitlement and arrogance that alienated those in royal circles, a habit of hanging out with the wrong sort of people, an utter inability to see when he was in the wrong, and an utter unwillingness to take responsibility for his own actions. Andrew, of course, had sown the seeds of his own downfall, and even he realised that via his friendship with power broker paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, he'd crossed a line.
We have a breaking story which we should respond to. That's why I stopped you, Matt, so forgive me. So, Prince Andrew. The king has initiated a process, so we're going to discuss this. Prince Andrew will no longer be Prince Andrew.
In the end, two strong women were central to his downfall, and neither of them lived to see the final humiliation play out. The first of those was his mother, Queen Elizabeth, who is accepted to have had a bit of a blind spot for Andrew's misbehaviour, but who, in 2022, stripped her wayward son of military affiliations and royal patronages. Her death later that year removed, at a stroke, Andrew's most powerful protection. The second strong woman in this story was not born into privilege, quite the reverse. Virginia Giuffre found herself plunged into the dark world of Jeffrey Epstein via the House of Trump. Her accusations, vehemently denied by Andrew, that he sexually assaulted her 3 times when she was 17, put a very human face on the scandal. She became the immovable witness, the victim who forced the monarchy to act, and, from beyond the grave, ensured Andrew's fall from grace wasn't just gossip. It was documented, it was settled, it was final. She remains the proof that one person can make a difference, even when pitted against the most powerful of opponents. Alex, we should ask, is this the royals showing some courage, or is it the royals doing what the royals have been doing for the last few centuries and tried to get ahead of a damaging story, reshape themselves, and, of course, to ensure their survival?
A bit of both, I would say, more of the latter, but that's because I have a dim view of the monarchy in any case. They will be in a position where they have a lot more information than we do. So they might know there's more stuff to come out, but maybe it does involve a little bit of courage as well. The Queen did have a huge fondness, what mother doesn't. His brother could be a little bit more detached and do what needed doing. What do you think?
Well, I know what I think should happen next, and that's really that the Metropolitan Police should reopen its investigations into this whole sordid affair. We know, if we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, we know that the authorities are appallingly lacking when it comes to dealing with allegations and victims of sexual crimes. I think what makes this case different is that we're not just talking about individual allegations of sexual abuse, but about how totemic institutions have acted or failed to act.
Which we were discussing in midweek, but on the topic of grooming gangs.
That's
but
right.
It is interesting that there is some shared ground here, isn't there? You're talking essentially about the same crime, but in very different surroundings.
And isn't that the key? That the point I make about us focusing on institutions is absolutely central to this. We're not talking about individual victims anymore. It's not on the front pages because somebody else has been a victim of alleged sexual assaults. We're talking about it being on the front pages because of the institutions that are involved in this. And the Metropolitan Police is now up to its neck in this, whether it likes it or not, because one of the alleged sexual assaults took place in London. The point I want to make is a slightly controversial point. And let me just make it clear that I do think Giuffre deserves her posthumous day in court, without any shadow of a doubt. But looking at why the Met might decide to take further action, if it won't act on behalf of the alleged victim, perhaps it's more likely to act on behalf of itself, because this is how systems work. Systems are designed to protect systems. And a sense of self-preservation at the highest echelons of the Met might be what it takes to reopen its proper investigations into the claims that have been made.
Look, the investigation is one thing, a prosecution is quite another. And my feeling, as much as this isn't what I or anyone wants, is that with the central witness, the victim of the assault, or the alleged assault, I should say, now tragically gone, it would be a very, very difficult prosecution to bring forward. But that doesn't mean that there isn't stuff to investigate. That doesn't mean there might not be other victims out there. I do note that Rachel Maskell, a formerly Labour MP, now independent, one of the ones who have had the whip withdrawn, she's now asking for Andrew to be removed from the chain of succession, as it were, the line of succession. I mean, it's tokenistic. He's 8th in the line of succession. It would take something fairly catastrophic for his services to be required in any way, but I understand the symbolism of it. There's a part of me that thinks there is a danger that this becomes a sort of displacement activity, that all the frustration and the anger is concentrated into this one person, and we end up just flogging him through the streets of London while nothing is done about the more systemic reasons that these things happen and these things go uninvestigated, which I think is the more important aspect of this.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely spot on with that. But the sad inevitability about the situation is that sometimes it takes one voice to bring the whole thing tumbling down. And Virginia Giuffre's autobiography is certainly a powerful tool for anyone wanting, anyone courageous enough to take on what's been going on. This will continue to grow arms and legs, though. I mean, the Met have already said that they're actively looking into fresh allegations that Andrew tried to use his police bodyguard, wasn't it, to smear Virginia Giuffre. There's more.
Yeah,
than
maybe the cover-up is actually more,
exactly that. It's that
more an
Al Capone
active
idea.
line. Yeah.
So there are other ways.
And of course, it's fair to say that Andrew has always denied all of these allegations and continues to deny them to this day. But at the same time, one cannot see his brother taking this truly historically unprecedented action if there weren't some doubt at the very, very least in the king's head that there is something to this.
Yeah, completely. The palace has been dealing with the fallout from these allegations for the thick end of a decade now. The Met now finds itself in the very awkward position of being an organisation that's managing to lag even behind the palace when it comes to taking decisive, positive action. Like you say, it's unprecedented. And at the point where an organisation like Buck House moves to make such a historic decision, I think that we have to work on the assumption that there is a whole lot more here that we don't know about, and we probably wouldn't be surprised by either. All that being said, Alex, is there anything notable about how our media is treating this story?
I think there is, and that's what pushes me to say that it's more the latter, as in the monarchy protecting itself rather than some act of bravery, because looking at the media coverage, the Daily Mail on Saturday had 12 pages of expert analysis, which consisted of pieces like, how will Andrew cope with bleak reality? This is a royal cancellation. Why Fergie's daughters are now more upset with her. And the main headline is, William and Kate pushed for Andrew to be ousted. And so it seems to me that there is quite a concerted effort to make this a story about how brave the remaining royals have been to take this action and push out this one bad apple. And so it's become a point of positive coverage for the main rump of the royal family, for the king and the heir to the throne, which I find quite interesting as a foreigner and a small R Republican, why things like this are not also the start of a healthy conversation about whether this country should be a monarchy, about whether there should be a system of a hereditary bequest of titles and privileges from parents to children, whether they are deserving or suitable or not. And I do find it quite extraordinary that there's not a peep about that in the mainstream. I'm sure there are some, but in the mainstream, there's not a single dissenting voice saying, does this mean we should look at inherited privilege and how it passes to undeserving people and how it is used by undeserving people? But nothing.
Quiet Riot. If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout, the one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo. Quiet Riot.
The other good thing is that it's going to be a bit awkward for Trump too, because Americans absolutely love the royals. This is going to be in every news bulletin, and it puts the Epstein story back in the headlines, so that can't be comfortable for the White House either.
Added to a long list of things that in a normal world wouldn't be comfortable for the White House. The big difference between Andrew and Trump, of course, is that Andrew has been incredibly weak for years and finally has been brought down. Trump's not at that stage yet.
No.
And when the time comes for Trump to be led to the metaphorical scaffold, it's a huge compendium of reasons that could be trotted out. And sadly, I doubt very much whether this is the one that would topple Trump.
The grim thought crept into my head because I began to think, does this super quick Trump visit, because it really was, the attempt at repair of relations with Harry, the praying with the Pope, the first visit to the Dachau death camp, the unveiling of the LGBT plus Veterans Memorial recently, and this stripping of Andrew of his title, residence, etc. Might that also indicate there is a clearing of the slate and not the best news about the king's health?
Well, I think it works on two levels. Certainly, concerns around Charles's health aren't going to go away. I think that's absolutely true. But from a more practical point, I think it speaks to the PR side of the royal family, which is incredibly powerful, actually getting its act together, and this being a very, very useful opportunity. He said, choosing his words diplomatically. The narrative has now moved very quickly from boo, hiss, Andrew is a bad person and must be punished, to a narrative about heroes and villains. Andrew quite clearly plays the role of the villain particularly well. William, and to a lesser extent Kate, are now playing the roles of heroes. And if you've worked in media for as long as I have, you know how utterly important it is to have a villain and also a hero in these stories.
Yes. Yeah, there's a fantastic documentary in the BBC iPlayer, I think it is still there, called The Two Princes, which I found quite startling, looking back basically over the history with the press. It was so clear that the press needed a hero and a villain at any given time, which meant that for a long time, and I know a lot of people have kind of erased this from the memory, but for a long time, when Harry was the brave soldier serving in Afghanistan, it was actually William who was the baddie of the piece.
That's right.
And there were loads of pieces about him being lazy and feckless and not interested in royal affairs. And as soon as the Queen went, then Harry instantly had to become the baddie, because we're now a short step away from William becoming king. And the entire narrative just switched. It really isn't about the royals. It is about how the press works hand in hand with the palace to get briefings and counter briefings and stir the pot and get quotes from peripheral figures. And it really is a fascinating study on how the press in this country works.
Quiet Riot.
Now, they couldn't get her for accepting a pair of earrings as a gift. They couldn't get her for high guilt rates. They couldn't get her for cutting benefits. They couldn't get her for crying. So another week, another angle by the right-wing press to try and get rid of Rachel Reeves. This is what former Tory spad Claire Pearsall thought about the story on GB News during the week.
You have Rachel Reeves stating that she knew absolutely nothing about it. So she wrote to Sir Keir Starmer and said, no, nothing, don't worry, nothing to see here. And then had to backtrack on that quite substantially when there were indeed some emails between her husband and a lettings agent. But it is always the cover-up. I don't care that she's the Chancellor, she's got a big, busy job. But when you're talking about something like this that she did know about because her husband was dealing with it, did she not speak to her husband? I think that remains to be seen as to what their relationship is doing.
If they didn't have a license.
And can you imagine if it was a Conservative minister that was doing it, they'd be calling for a head on a stick.
Is that really what would have happened if it had been a Tory minister? Recollections differ, it seems. Kenny, what is the basic meat of this story? Give us, like, the cliff notes.
The cliff notes would be nothing burger. That's it. An absolute nothing burger. If you want slightly more meat in your burger bun, Reeves' home in Dulwich was rented out after she moved into 11 Downing Street. She didn't get a licence from Southwark Council that allowed her to rent that home out. That was naughty. Her letting agent subsequently held their hands up and said, oops, that was our fault. In the meantime, Reeves wrote to the Prime Minister saying, look, it was an inadvertent mistake. Of course it was. She accepted full responsibility, has applied for a licence.
And the local councillor said they're not planning to take any action.
And most importantly and most significantly of all in the story, the media then did what the media always do. They put scorched earth headlines way before finding out actual facts. There you go. That's your nothing burger summarised.
And then there was a tiny pathetic resurgence to the story. Her husband found the actual email correspondence with the letting agents, and it turns out the letting agents had said, we are going to apply for the license on your behalf. Don't worry about it, it's handled. Then what happened was the person they were dealing with quit their job that Friday, and the person taking over didn't know that they were meant to apply for a license, so no one applied for a license. There were a couple of evergreens like Dan Hodges and people like that on Friday going, well, this proves that she misled the Prime Minister, because it turns out that when she said she didn't know a license was required, that was a lie, because her husband knew a license was required. It is pathetic. All that happened on Friday is that an email exchange surfaced that actually proves beyond any doubt that she was completely innocent in this. And they're still trying to make something of it.
Yeah.
And it's key. It's really important to say that it's Rachel Reeves that found this out, wrote to the Prime Minister and let them know. And that's how the media got hold of it, okay? In quite direct contrast with what Claire Pearsall was saying about had this been a Tory minister, this wasn't the press finding out some scandal.
No, there's
this
no Pulitzer
was her
Prize.
Being upfront about it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people comparing the story to Angela Rayner, though. Are the stories directly comparable? And if they are, why did Reeves survive when Rayner didn't?
I suppose if you drew the Venn diagram of both stories, there'd be a bit in the middle where they crossed, because they both involve second properties and such like. The Rayner story was slightly more complicated because she'd saved around, if I recall, £40,000 in tax, didn't she? That made that story much more of a tinderbox than what we were seeing with Reeves. So while they're not completely different, they do differ in the magnitude of what was happening. Let's face it, Reeves was pretty much completely in the clear. With Rayner, it was a little bit more muddy, and that story would have continued to have appeared on front pages for days and days and days and days, the way that the media winds were blowing. From Reeves' perspective, we know that there's an element of the media that editorializes before it does journalism, who use their front pages as editorial platforms primarily when it comes to dealing with issues of politics in particular, and put the journalistic duty to uncover the truth as a very distant second. That's not going to change between now and the next election. That's not going to change, full stop. We know the game that's being played. Much as it disappoints me as a former journalist myself, we have to be realistic about it. This is the challenge that the likes of Rachel Reeves faces. And these are only going to get worse going into the budget coming up to Christmas. So I'd be lying if I said I was at all surprised by what's happened. But my goodness me, I'm so disappointed. It's just so rubbish.
The only thing I would add is that the timing matters as well. If you reverse the facts of those two cases, I think Angela Rayner would have survived purely by virtue of being second anyway.
Yeah.
Because having sacked one very senior member of the cabinet and done a reshuffle, I think the political implications of then sacking another one, especially a chancellor, especially a couple of weeks before a budget, over something relatively minor, would have been madness.
Let me ask you something else then. The fact that there are more women in positions of very high power in this country politically now means that there are more female targets. But even with that being said, do you think it's much of a coincidence that the right-wing media in particular hunt, it seems, almost exclusively female Labour ministers in a pack?
I mean, correlation is not causation, etc. But there is a gusto with which I think stories about female Labour ministers are pursued that stinks of an undercurrent of misogyny for me. I mean, it's a fact that there is a higher level of scrutiny on women in politics than there is on men. It's a fact that there is a higher level of scrutiny on progressive politicians than there is on conservative ones.
Yeah.
Bad behavior is almost expected by men, and it's almost expected by right-wingers. And so, of course, it's impossible for me to think that those two streams don't come together and make Labour women in particular an absolute red rag to a bull when it comes to the right-wing media. Of course that's there. And we see it even in the way they cover them. During the Angela Rayner story, there was zero reason, and would never have happened if this was some Eton graduating Tory. It would never have been a photo splashed across all the front pages on holiday vaping, as if, the whole tone of it was that this woman is a common slag. That was what the combination of the headline and the visual was saying every day about Angela Rayner. And to not see that, you have to not want to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a sense that Labour, and Labour women in particular, have got no right to be in government. And the old boys network has got to work with everybody else who wears the right tie in tandem to shorten the rule. They don't belong.
Yeah. No, you do. You really do get that sense. From the day after the election, you got that sense that everyone just rolled up their sleeves and went, right, let's make sure they only get one term. And actually, let's make sure that that one term is as short as possible. It was crystal clear in the way anything that this government has done has been misreported, and anything good this government has done has been completely ignored. Yes, we've talked many, many times about how poor Labour's comms are, but we have to acknowledge that on the other side, there is a group of people who are not receptive to Labour's comms, whether they're good or bad.
Yeah, of course.
And it takes something quite extraordinary to turn them around, because they don't think even a sort of centre-left, if you can even call Labour that at the moment, has any right to be in government, that government belongs to them and their mates. Just have a look at Kemi Badenoch's front bench right now. Just have a look at what Jenrick did when he was housing minister. Expedited licenses so that people avoided hundreds of thousands of pounds with a new duty coming in the day after he'd been at a dinner with him. Even at Kemi Badenoch, she came out this week saying lawbreakers should be lawmakers. It is only because the Labour Party decided not to rake her over hot coals when she hacked the website of Harriet Harman. And Harriet Harman took the view that having a black woman enter politics was a very good thing, and she wasn't going to destroy her career by reporting her to the police. Look at Priti Patel.
Please, let's not.
Sacked for having secret meetings with private companies in Israel when she was Home Secretary, and now she's back in the shadow cabinet as Foreign Secretary. I mean, so to say if a Tory minister had done this, their head would be on a spike. It's like, when? When did that happen?
Let me ask you then, as we close this section, just to gaze into your crystal ball. You've given us a litany of examples there of former Tory ministers who have...
I haven't even touched Boris Johnson.
Please, that's probably for the best. We don't have any Dettol to hand if you had. Looking ahead 2 years, 2.5 years, do you think there's a risk that the media beast will turn against senior Tories in the way that it's turned on senior Labour figures if Farage continues to be successful in his dance with these media outlets. Are they feeding an animal that's going to come back and eat them come the next election?
I'm not sure. I think it's more likely that the media is going to turn against Farage before the next election. Once the Conservative Party ceases to be led by a black woman and goes back to some, good old chap, I'm certain that sections of the media will return to the embrace of the Tory party and start turning on reform. And that will be a very good thing too, because I think that will genuinely split the vote on the right.
Well, that's it. In 2 years' time, we have a fight to look forward to when, one way or another, they're going to start turning on themselves. Bring it on, I say.
But also, and I think we've discussed this ages ago, there is a media strategy of just taking it.
Yeah.
Just taking the punishment, and actually public sentiment turns to sympathy eventually.
And from the perspective of headline-making media that makes headlines itself rather than just reporting headlines, there are two very, very important things, and Rupert Murdoch is the epitome of this approach. You want to be in a position where you can effect change and put your people in at the very top for obvious reasons. The secondary strategy, of course, is you also want to be associated with winners. And Murdoch in particular is very good at waiting to the last minute and picking the person who he thought was going to win, not because he particularly backed them, because he wanted to back a winner. And there's a tension between these two approaches. You can spend 4 years fighting for a particular side, but if it looks like you're going to be damaging your reputation, making yourself look stupid, in that final year, in that final 6 months, it's quite acceptable to pivot. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen.
Quiet riot. This is a Bose moment. It's 10 blocks from the train to your apartment door. 10 basic, boring city blocks until the beat drops in Bose clarity. Streetlights become spotlights as you strut down the sidewalk, your own personal runway. With Bose, you get every note, every bass line, every detail, just as you should. Those 10 blocks, they could be the best part of your day. Your life deserves music. Your music deserves Bose. Find your perfect product at Bose.com/Spotify. Quiet riot.
Well, there's also some good news from the Netherlands this week, which, of course, have barely made it into our media since they don't accord with the general "the far right is on the march across Europe" narrative that we've been hearing for the last 2 decades or so. Our Alex caught up with a very familiar voice for an update on the Dutch election result.
Alex, so the Netherlands is your base of operations, as it were, so you're in quite a good position to explain what's been quite an extraordinary election in the way it's shaped in the last sort of couple of months running up to it. So what happened?
Yes, well, you would think that it would put me in a good position, but like a lot of these kinds of European elections, it does resist simplicity. So I'll do my best to lay it out in a way which is as simple as possible. But the bottom line is centre-left party, Democracy 66, is going to be the largest party. This is the party of Rob Jetten. He could be the youngest prime minister in Dutch history, and he will be the first openly gay leader in Dutch history.
Oh, I didn't know he was gay.
Yes, he is engaged to be wed to his Argentinian fiancée, I believe, next year.
Oh, how fantastic.
Possibly 2 reasons to celebrate in the new year. Because
cheered me right up, yeah.
There we go. Grin and share it for the weekend. So yeah, his party is pro-EU, pro-climate investment, pro-European army, pro-EU debt sharing. On the surface, it's very good news for listeners of this podcast. There's a lot of echoes of recent European electoral shuffling around. Because 2 years ago, D66 had just 9 seats, and just over a month ago, the party was in 5th place and 18 seats behind. But I think the emerging sort of charm of Jetten, the positive messaging, has given him a sort of Macron-like boost to the top table. And a few sort of twists of fate helped him along the way, because Gert Wilder's dropped out of a debate over concerns for his safety a couple of months ago. A Belgian terror group was making credible threats on his life. He's had private security for a very long time, and he stopped campaigning at the beginning of October. And then in early September, there were riots in The Hague, which caused vandalizing of the D66 offices. And this was a way that Jetten could use an example of how far the far right has taken the debate in the Netherlands over the last few years. His catchphrase for the campaign was, "Yes, we can," which, sound familiar. The Dutch media has called him clean cut, straight talking, charming. And I think after all the sort of chaos and doomsaying from Wilders over the last few years, clearly that's had an effect. And it's now in his hands to form the next coalition of the country.
Wilders, from what I can see in the aggregate polling, he had two periods where his popularity went severely down. And one was right after he collapsed the coalition government, basically, because they refused to go with him on far-right immigration stuff. Surprise, surprise. And the second was in the pre-election period. So his rating took two tumbles. But the thing that seems to have made the difference is this just meteoric rise in the last month of the campaign of the insurgent D66 party. And I hear that they're considered to have done extremely well at debates. Yetta himself did a lot of very good media. He even appeared in a sort of quiz show for charity that went down very well. And so even though politically they're not in the same place, do you think there are Polanski sort of echoes there in someone that comes in and just speaks like a human being and says the thing quite a lot of people are thinking can suddenly just shoot up in the polls?
Absolutely. I mean, I think he is, without a doubt, charismatic, young. He is offering solutions and he's offering them in a very straightforward way. But I also think that the slide in the other centre parties can't be overstated. So you have the VVD, who were Mark Rutte's previous party, who were part of that broad coalition that Wilders put together last year.
Yeah, they're centre-right, aren't they, Mark Rutte's lot?
They're centre-right, but they've certainly suffered from that association of being part of that coalition. The Christian Democrats have had a slide as well. And the Green Coalition, I think there is a certain sense that, at least for the more centre parties, they present a bit more of a socialist danger, although the reality of that can be contested. Franz Timmermans, people may recognise the name from him being apparatchik in the sort of cabinets in the EU of Jean-Claude Juncker and Ursula von der Leyen. And I think that those quite close EU connections didn't play that well for him. I don't think he's particularly strong as a leader either. And of course, he quit the party after the poor showing from them. So I think that the opposition centre-left parties, their lack of inspiration, their lack of a clear message has certainly caused this slide for them. But again, I think there is a certain Polanski effect of having somebody who is charismatic and thoughtful and can present new solutions.
And so what happens now? I mean, it's important to know that coalitions are the norm in Dutch politics, right? They have been the norm for the last 2 decades. So what happens now? Is it a relatively straightforward process? Who's prime minister in the meantime?
So prime minister in the meantime is the same prime minister that we've had for the last year or so, Dick Schoof, who is a former sort of intelligence chief who was picked by the coalition. He says that Santa Claus is going to arrive before a new coalition. I think it's more likely the Easter Bunny is going to arrive. Jette says the D66 have closed the Wilders chapter, but of course it's not going to be that simple. They're not going to be part of this new coalition by any stretch, but he is going to be sniping from the sidelines the whole time. What happens now is that a scout from D66, as the largest party, will seek out other potential members of that coalition, and it's going to be about finding the common ground that will enable them to form some kind of leadership. Actual outright majority is probably going to be quite difficult. They need 76 seats outright. It's a 150-seat parliament, and their most likely partners are going to be the Christian Democrats and the Green Coalition. That still leaves them just under the amount they need to lead a majority. So it's likely that they will probably also want to include the VVD, again, Mark Rutte's old party, centre-right. They have said they don't want to work with socialists, but I think we're going to see some wiggle room on that. It'll be 3 parties in the minority, but I think that if Jette is going to have any chance of getting the things through that he wants, if he wants to establish a progressive coalition that's going to replace the most far-right government in Dutch history, as Wilders' government was called, then he will need to bring all of those parties together, and that's going to take a very long time.
So there may be some sense the centre-right party staying out of it. I mean, just thinking ahead, if there is a coalition of basically everyone else and it doesn't go well and it is problematic, it then leaves Wilders in a very good position next election. So there may be some strategic sense in actually keeping the centre-right party outside the minority government, but cooperating with votes in parliament. Is that something that rings true?
Absolutely. I think pretty much every party is going to be nervous except for Jette's D66 and Gert Wilder's, because he'll know that support for his policies are still strong. He'll know that the position of the other parties around him is pretty weak, and they're going to be scarred from working in the previous coalition. They're going to be not used to working in this kind of coalition as it will be established by D66. So I think a lot of them are going to be on the lookout for not weakening their position and not giving the PVV, Gert Wilder's party, the chance to come back at some later date.
All that remains to say, bedankt, Alex.
Thank you, Velmanier.
Thank you, all the Alexes. What cheering news that is indeed.
Quiet, riot.
From Curtis 50 Cent Jackson.
Tommy back.
Yeah, I am.
And the executive producers of Power.
There's levels to this game.
Comes the final season of Force.
We're gonna have to be careful about our next move.
We get what we can now, and take the rest later. This is gonna be the battle of our life. It's go time.
This is a dangerous life that I choose to be in with you.
Force.
Never bet against me, because I'm always win.
Premieres November 7th, only on Stars and the Stars app.
Quiet, riot.
I don't know exactly when it was that American Halloween traditions like carving pumpkins and trick-or-treating became a thing in the UK, but they plainly have. They are even beginning to catch on in Asia. Only last week, a toddler whose head looks like a carved pumpkin toured the Far East, demanding golf clubs, gold crowns, and candy in exchange for not egging your country and putting tariffs up to 50%. Only China told him to fuck off via its video doorbell. Now, we horror fans are, however, most grateful for the veritable glut of new releases and restorations of older classics that accompanies the season. Apropos of that, I thought we could chat through our favourites. So, Kenny, to keep this episode vaguely to time, I will ask for one classic horror and one release from the last few years that got you gripping the arms of your seat.
Okay, well, my classic is a classic that I return to all the time. My classic horror film is Jaws, released in 1975. It's Hitchcockian in its use of the bad guy, of the bad shark. It remains probably my all-time favourite film.
Noon the 5th day, Mr. Hooper, Lockheed Ventura saw us. He swung in low and he saw us too. A young pilot, a lot younger than Mr. Hooper anyway. He saw us and he come in low, and 3 hours later, a big fat PBY comes down and started to pick us up. You know, that was the time I was most frightened, waiting for my turn. I'll never put on a life jacket again. So 1,100 men went in the war. 316 men come out. The Sharks took the rest. June the 29th, 1945.
My other choice for a classic was going to be the original Cat People, but we'll come back to that in a second, I think.
Yeah.
My new classic, I struggle with modern day horror. I really love old school 1930s, 1940s dark horror. So if I have to say that there's a relatively new horror film that I'd list, it would be The Wicker Man, which is like, I think 2006. So it's not that new, but the only reason...
the one with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, but the only reason that I'd mention that one is because it made me go back and watch the original from way back in 1973. It was just, weird Highland murderous stuff. What's not to like?
Oh, what a silly girl you are to make all this fuss. It's just a little frog. It'll do that poor sore throat good. Now, anyone would think you didn't want to get better. Now, in he goes. And out he comes. There. Now, that didn't hurt much, did it? Tasted hard. Never mind, darling. It's all over now. Here's your sweet for being a brave girl. Come on, which one would you like? There. Now, he's got your horrid old sore throat now, hasn't he, poor creature? Can't you hear him croaking? Can I do anything for you, Sergeant?
Oh, I doubt it. Seeing it all raving mad.
Okay, I mean, Jaws is just a tremendous film. I watch it all the time. I don't fully see it as a horror film. I don't know why. I couldn't explain to you why. I see it more as an action with a sort of creature antagonist. But it is a superb film, and it's one that every film school teaches during script class.
I dived into Rotten Tomatoes just to make sure that I wasn't making that mistake, and Jaws does feature way up on their horror favourites. So
I mean, it is considered a horror by most, but I don't know. Alien is considered a sci-fi by most, and I would consider that a horror set in space. So maybe my categorizations are a bit.
Do you know what we're both leaning into? We're both leaning into gender-bendered horror sci-fi.
Yeah, that's true.
Fab,
that's true.
You know,
but if you want me to recommend a newer one,
yes,
if you like The Wicker Man, I would highly recommend Midsommar. It has exactly that vibe of a film. It has that weirdness, sort of nice, folksy people turning sinister. And it also has that extraordinary pivot that The Wicker Man has, you know, when it goes very suddenly from being benign to very scary, I think, in the space of one scene. And I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it because I recommend it highly. But Midsommar has that same device.
Have you got a classic then?
My classic is Cat People, but the 1982 Cat People.
Save me. Only you can stop this killing. You've got to make love with me.
No. I'm not like you.
Well, that's the lie that will kill your lover. At least let me spare you that horror. Oliver doesn't love you. He loves the panther. He wants you because he fears you. Let Alice have him. She thinks his fear is courage, and he thinks his fear is love. Well, they were made for each other. So were we.
The funny thing is that you were going to pick Cat People as your classic. And then you saw my note in the script and you thought we were going for the same film. Now, I adore the original. Simone, actually, both of them, that pair of films. And of course, the first Cat People is the originator of the jump scare in movies, that bus coming along and the door hissing open very suddenly. No, the reason I'm going for the 1982 Paul Schrader sort of update is because I took the brief quite literally, and it is the first film that genuinely scared me very, very deeply, to the extent that I didn't see any horror film for several years after.
Right.
And I think Malcolm McDowell and John Hurd are splendid in the film. Nastasia Kinski is so beautiful. It's sort of directed almost like an 80s MTV pop video.
Yeah.
In many ways. It has that vibe and that gorgeous music.
Giorgio Moroder, wasn't it?
Giorgio Moroder, and the theme song sung by David Bowie. I mean, wow. But it genuinely scared me. I haven't actually seen it since. I can't. It really disturbed me for many, many years. And then it was, to give you an idea of the gap, it was Hellraiser was the next horror film I went to see in the cinema. So a good 5 years. And that was very scary. But I was kind of old enough to enjoy the scares, if that makes sense.
I need to do a shout out to the film that terrified me when I was a kid and had the same effect, that I swerved horror films. Looking back on it now, it's quite ridiculous, but it was from the Quatermass series. I think it was Quatermass and The Pit. Glorious sort of B-movie sci-fis from the 1950s, shot in cheap black and white, and with some phenomenally bad special effects. I mean, really jaw-grindingly bad, so bad they're good. But there was a scene at the end, and listeners, apologies if I've got the wrong Quatermass film, but there's a scene at the end where a fiery devil appears in the sky as the film reaches its crescendo, and the good guys have won. But there's this last dramatic scene of this burning outline of a devil in the sky, and that image terrified the bejesus out of me. I mean, that was a real not sleeping for nights, wondering what the heck was out there when I was young. And it was seared into my imagination. And it was years and years before I watched the film again. And I did enjoy it in that sort of 1950s schlock way. But I was also, at the same time, simultaneously re-terrified when I saw that end scene, and somewhat bemused that it had any impact on me at all, because, as is the way with these things, it was a bit rubbish as well. And so, but, credit to the people who were making these movies back then that with the tools they had at their disposal, they were still able to have that sort of visceral impact on people like us.
The film that made me sort of unsteady on my feet for a little while and what is out there was actually Angel Heart. So even though it's not in-your-face horror, I just found the whole voodoo Satanism elements, they obviously unsettled something deep within me and made me uneasy about all that side of things for a long time. And if you want completely off left field shout outs, if we're doing those, then my shout out would be for Night of the Eagle, which is a 60s British
Oh, I thought
horror.
you were going to Night of the Hunter. I was about to applaud you.
No,
there, right?
Night of the Eagle with Peter Wyngarde and Janet Blair. One of the most underrated, genuinely original horror film and really quite unsettling. So that brings me to my more recent choice. And that goes to When Evil Lurks, a 2023 Argentinian horror film written, directed by Demian Ruña. There is actually quite a lot of good horror coming out of South America at the moment. I've seen 3 or 4 films that I found very, very good. But When Evil Lurks, it truly punches you in the face and takes absolutely no prisoners. It takes quite a lot to frighten the bejesus out of 50-year-old me, you know, after 3.5 solid decades of watching horror as my genre of choice. But When Evil Lurks, it does that. It is part zombie, part virus, part actually exorcist film. It takes place in the Argentinian countryside. And it is the scariest film I have seen in a very, very long time. Big thumbs up for that if you like to be scared, and definitely stay away if you do not.
Quiet Riot.
And somewhat horrifically, that brings us to the end of another Sunday school. Feel free to scream into the void.
And once you've screamed and screamed and screamed, take a breath and head on over to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod, where you can back us for as little as $5 and ensure we keep bringing you happiness and horror in respective measures.
And we've got a very, very busy midweek episode in preparation right now, so set your alarms for Thursday morning if you want to get first dibs on that treat.
Yes, a very big announcement coming next week. Until then, we love you lot and lot. Bye!
Bye!
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.
Excuse me, Laurie.
Oh, Mr. Brackett, I'm sorry, Mr. Brackett.
Oh, I didn't mean to startle you.
That's all right.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?